up. This is Under the Hood, how to audit and optimize your online booking tool. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We're just going to give one more moment for everyone to connect. I still see a few coming in, and we don't want you to miss any of this great webinar. All right, thank you so much. We will have a few polls, so stay close to your screens. But as of right now, I'm going to pass you over to Harry Hoffman. Harry, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. So I'm Harry Hoffman. I've been with GoldSpring for a couple of years now. My past experience has been on both the TMC side and on the customer side, on the buyer side. And I have a background in travel technology. With me also today is Julie. Julie, do you want to give a quick introduction? Oh, you're on mute, Julie.
Thank you, Harry. Yeah, hi, everyone. I've also been with GoldSpring for a couple of years now. I spent most of my career working across both the supplier and client sides of the travel industry, primarily in operations and travel technology. Recently, I've focused more on optimizing travel technology ecosystems, kind of fine-tuning the booking tools, working through GDS challenges, and resolving some integration issues. So obviously, I enjoy digging into the details to troubleshoot these problems and simplify processes so that we can find some practical solutions that actually improve the experience for both the travelers and travel program managers. Thank you all for joining us today. So Harry, take it away.
Great. So thank you, Julie. So what we're going to be talking about today is doing an online booking tool audit and really looking under the hood and how to really optimize and bring the most out of your OBT. Our agenda, so we're going to be covering, why an OBT is now a control point in your program. What's really changed since the last time you've looked at your OBT seriously, common failure points that we find, a case study, showing some experience that we have and how it impacted compliance and governance. And then also the audit value, looking at our methodology and then next steps, how to really proceed forward if you choose to go forward with an OBT audit. Before we jump into that, though, something that we really want to make sure that we focus on is really kind of holistically, the value of a strategic managed travel program. So, here at GoldSpring, we find that there are really 6 main strategic drivers that drive the travel program. Cost management, which can impact supplier agreements, demand management. There's sustainability, which of course looks at the environmental piece and traveler well-being. Regulatory compliance, that can be anything from taxes and ethics and data security, legal stuff. Traveler satisfaction, making sure that the travelers are happy and that they're having a good experience. Duty of care. So of course that's, governance and making sure that, responsibility for where your travelers are. And then also process efficiency, which can impact, both direct cost and indirect costs. And really, the OBT, ties back into those drivers, through several different areas. So cost management, it's always, not just about having the discounts loaded to the program, but then also making sure that the program in the OBT is built so it's driving better decision making. So making sure that you're having lower leakage, making sure that you're looking at both direct and indirect savings. There's also sustainability, features within the OBT, making sure that you're choosing the right architecture and emissions visibility for your travelers so that you can help them make the right decisions. We also look at regulatory compliance. So, on the back end, how taxes apply to everything on the OBT, the duty of care, making sure that all the data is being captured and flowing through, GDPR, data controls. And then, of course, one of the big things with the OBT is traveler satisfaction, making sure that your traveler is getting the right consumer grade experience so that it's really working smarter for them and not harder. And then, of course, duty of care, there's that visibility into where they're booking. And then, the big thing with the OBT audit and with OBT overall is process efficiency. It's got to work smoothly. It's got to make sure that it has a clean handoff for all the different pieces that are involved with it, making sure there are fewer agent touches, and then also, trying to make sure that it's less clunky for travelers. It's probably one of the biggest, complaints that we hear overall. And then, the overall objective of a OBT audit is really less towards policing, more towards guidance and decision making. Again, what I like to say, travel smarter, not harder, making sure that they're empowered to make sure that they're buying what we want them to buy, that we're directing them towards the right path. Real quick, we do want to do a quick poll. How long have you been on your existing booking tool? Has it been less than 1 year? Has it been 1 to 3 years? Do you have a season travel program where it's been 3 to 6 years or even 7 or greater? Go ahead and answer those, and Melissa, let us know when we're ready to share those results.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Harry. The poll is available to you now, and I see a great amount of responses coming in. If you would like to respond, please go ahead and do so now, as we will close this poll in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you so much. Harry, here are the results.
Perfect. So yeah, what we're seeing here is over 80% have had their tool 3 to 6 years or even 7 or greater. More than half have been on their tool 7 to greater. So that really, brings up, a good point here. What we're seeing with OBTs is oftentimes it's set it and forget it. Companies will procure an OBT and they'll have it in place, and over time they'll put in a lot of patches, but they won't really look under the hood holistically like they did when they implemented it for quite a while. So that's a really good point there. So it's really good to see. And so really, kind of builds into why do an OBT audit. So, when we look at the travel program as a whole, I like to, equate it to being like a house. You've got, your roof can be your duty of care program. It covers you and it protects you. Your data is really kind of underlying everything. It's kind of that foundation to your program. It's what everything sits on. That includes your data feeds, your HR feeds, and everything else. When we look at the house, your OBT is really the door to your house. It's really your front door. It's the first impression that travelers have, that candidates and new hires have. It has your locks in place to make sure that compliance and data quality and duty of care are there. It's got guardrails to make sure that everybody's protected. And then also, very much like a door, it can have drafts. And that's where leakage comes in. That's where bad habits enter, and where travelers can kind of run wild and book what outside of what you really want them to do. So really, our goal with the OBT audit is to seal up those drafts and to make sure that everything is tightened up. Maybe put a new coat of paint on it, some new locks, and really kind of make sure that it's working more efficiently. Current trends that we're seeing that call for an audit, some things out there that other than, the traditional areas and complaints, NDC is, everybody knows what NDC is by this point. It's providing a lot richer content. So making sure that you are getting that right content, so if NDC is something that's important to you, making sure that you're really driving that as part of your overall online booking tool strategy and incorporating that into your tool. So that's a prime reason to do an audit. Another reason is traveler trust. That's always been, kind of the biggie, making sure that your travelers have, confidence in your tool, buy-in in the tool, making sure that it's not feeling slow, making sure that the content is showing exactly what they want to see. AI has, been a big thing for over a year now. As OBTs evolve, they're having more and more AI presence. So making sure that, that is also incorporated if that's a feature of your online booking tool. And then also, governance and risk. We want to make sure that, admin rights, P&R visibility, data feeds, change control, all those things are really locked down. So that way your tool is not getting away from you. It's, the big thing that we want to stress though, is that, OB2 is no longer a set it and forget it platform. If you've had your tool for 3 to 6 years, even 7 or greater, that's even more reason to do a health program check to make sure that it's, not just up to snuff, but that it's, current and that it's timely with the trends that are going on in the industry and with your overall travel program. We want to do another quick poll. What do you hear most noise-wise about your OBT? Are you hearing more noise about speed and performance? Is it about the content that you're seeing? Not seeing the right content, not finding the flights that people want to find? Is it poor search results? Are you seeing more site errors and issues there? or is it just, you know, inconsistency with policy or other things on your site?
Thank you, Harry. Yes, this poll is open to you. We're going to leave it open for a few moments. So if you'd like to provide your feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. All right, we're going to get ready to close this polling very shortly. So if you'd like to give us your feedback, please go ahead and do so now, as we will close it in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you so much. Harry, here are the results.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. So yeah, content, that is the big thing. That's, you know, where we talk about NDC and making sure that you've got the right discounts loaded and you got the right fares showing up to everybody. Poor search results, I would say that's also the second biggest bugaboo that we see when we hear feedback from customers. You know, oftentimes it's, you know, not, you're looking for something very specific and that's not coming up. And then, yeah, you know, site errors, policy issues and inconsistencies, speed and performance, those are all also very common too. So, you know, speed and consistency, that's, you know, something that we had mentioned before. And, you know, what I always kind of joke around and say is that latency is the OBT's favorite hobby. You know, sometimes you can be sitting there and searching and it just seems to be going and going forever and ever. Julie, do you want to talk about some of the other common challenges that we find during our OBT audits?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Harry. Can move on to that next slide, I think.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, here we have some of the most common challenges we face with online booking tools. These patterns, they rarely occur in isolation. You know, slow search may be driven by out-of-date discount codes or excessive filters. Poor relevance may come from policy settings or blocked content or maybe even your sort order. Message fatigue can also compound this problem when travelers encounter too many messages or messages that appear at the wrong point in the booking process. They may begin dismissing all the pop-ups, including those with important information. That's why it's essential to kind of evaluate the entire shopping and servicing journey, not simply whether or not the site is technically functioning. This is also where a neutral perspective can add value because an independent review complements the existing program knowledge. It brings a fresh lens. You know, we can test objectively and identify connections that may be difficult to see while managing just the day-to-day operations. These challenges that we see here, they're often signs of a deeper issue. But the next step is to look beyond that initial complaint and identify the configuration, the process, or the content decisions that are creating that experience. And we can move on to the next one. And here we kind of talk about, you know, the audit, it separates symptoms from root causes. An audit starts by looking beyond the initial pain points to understand the underlying cause. A complaint that the tool is slow may actually mean that the traveler is repeating searches because the results are irrelevant. While a complaint that content is missing, it might trace back to the sort order or the policy settings. That distinction matters. And a strategic review connects the symptom, the root cause, and the corrective action. And once we understand the value of identifying these root causes, the question then becomes, why don't more organizations conduct comprehensive OBT audits? And we found several, you know, practical barriers often prevent any organization from taking that next step. Buyers often avoid audits because they require time, administrative access, cross-functional participation, and a willingness to challenge some of their long-standing decisions. But OBT ecosystems they're changing fast, and you know, AI recommendations, airline retailing, profile data, payment, policy, servicing, that's all becoming more interconnected. And despite these challenges, organizations are increasingly recognizing the value of this and taking a more complete and objective look at their booking environment. I think we have one more poll coming up here we want to take to kind of understand how many of you have ever completed this type of review. Have you done a comprehensive audit or just a series of isolated fixes? A yes answer here means that your organization has reviewed the complete booking process, including search, content, policy, approval flow, data feeds, permissions, messaging, payment, and servicing. So we'll give everyone a second to answer here, and Melissa will let us know when we have the results.
Thank you. Yes, the poll is open, and we will begin closing it shortly. Thank you so much. If you'd like to provide your feedback, please go ahead and do so now, as we will begin closing in 3, 2, and 1. Thank you so much. Julie, here are the results.
Wow, this is actually very encouraging to see that some of you have completed some comprehensive audits. That's a good practice to have. It's a really good thing to do, maybe even annually, to keep up with everything and all the changes and releases that happen with online booking tools. For those of you who selected no or only spot fixes, you're certainly not alone. A lot of organizations have experienced that frustration of addressing those recurring issues without really having the opportunity to step back and evaluate the entire environment. Based on what we typically see, most organizations have not completed a comprehensive audit of their booking tool. Instead, the teams often address individual issues as they arise, fixing a policy rule, adjusting a message, or troubleshooting a content gap. Those fixes, they may solve the immediate problem, but they do not always reveal how the full booking environment is performing or where additional optimization opportunities exist. The good news is that these challenges can be addressed through a structured review and optimization process. We have a case study to share that kind of demonstrates how one organization moved from their ongoing troubleshooting to a more comprehensive approach. Like many, this team had primarily addressed issues as they arose rather than conducting a full audit. Over time, those individual issues began to affect performance, traveler confidence, their ability to understand how the tool was truly configured. The issue was not simply a slow site, even though that was the primary complaint. It was a much broader misalignment among the traveler experience, available content, policy configuration, and program governance. Travelers were seeing slow performance, but also illogical results, which led them to then question whether the tool contained accurate and complete content. Once the travelers feel the need to verify every result on another website or on an airline website, then booking outside that managed channel becomes more likely. They lose trust in the system. And without a documented configuration baseline, the travel team couldn't quickly determine whether the problem was perception, content, policy, or a specific, system setting. So the audit created the visibility needed to understand both what travelers were experiencing, but also what was happening behind the scenes. We have a little before and after slide here to kind of show the process. The audit, it first documented the current configuration before making any changes, and then tested the booking flows by traveler type and by policy group, prioritizing the fixes that improved search speed, result relevance, and policy consistency first, while also creating a tracker for ownership and validation. That governance is essential because a change can improve one step while unintentionally disrupting another. So it's important to know where the change came from and the impact that it had. The after state was not only better, system performance, but also a mechanism for preventing that future configuration drift. After the audit, they could be confident they were using the best, most optimized version of their current booking tool. This also improved future technology evaluations for them because any alternative platform that they were looking at would be compared against a fully optimized current tool, not a tool that's limited by outdated settings and unresolved issues. So it was more of an apples to apples comparison if they were looking at other booking tools. And now with the booking environment now fully reviewed and optimized, the next question is, what value does that create for the organization? And I'll turn it back over to Harry to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when we look at the OBT audit, there's the surface value of, oh, you're refreshing the site, So that's always a given. But, what ultimately does that bring to the table? What we find is it increases traveler confidence. Once the tool is optimized, it's working smoothly, travelers are going to have a much easier path as they go through the OBT. They're going to have less resistance. It's going to be smoother, less clunky. They're going to find the content that they're wanting. There's also cost control. As I always like to say, travel smarter, not harder. You want to make sure that you're providing your travelers with the content that you want them to book, and that you are also pointing them in that direction, empowering them to make those right decisions. Then there's also the operational efficiency, making sure that you have fewer touch points, fewer clunkiness, making sure that there are less exceptions out there. Everything is more visible and less blocked. What we often find is a lot of complaints, where travelers can't find stuff is because it's blocked. If you have it more set to show but do not allow, as an example, they can see that it's there and they can see that it exists, but they can also see that, these are not the droids that they're looking for. There's also data quality. As you go through an OBT audit, we look at it holistically. So it's not just about making sure that the right content is plugged in, but it's also your reason codes. It's also, what you're capturing at point of sale in terms of data. If you're funneling that correctly and you're providing the right options there, your data is going to be cleaner and it's going to work better for you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you want that data to tell a story: who, what, when, why, where, and how, not just individual, concession points, so to speak. And then there's also governance. You're going to have clear documentation from an OBT audit. So when we do our OBT audit, we document everything. We make sure that it's, you have a blueprint that's very clear of what your site looks like right now, what our exact, recommendations are. We outline who has access to what, so that way you make sure that you have, complete, ownership control in terms of, how often have we seen where, an agent over in India or Singapore has, changed a policy setting because somebody was complaining about, something being out of policy that they wanted to book. I know that when I was an account manager, I saw that and heard that many times. So by locking those things down, you're really giving yourself more control of the site. How do we do it overall? What is our methodology for doing the OBT audit? So, first we start with discovery. So we start with the documentation review. So we ask you to collect what documents you may have from implementation or the last audit you may have done, so we can really kind of understand what is supposed to be there. We also want to review the policy. We want to understand, oftentimes policy does not fit exactly how an OBT is programmed. So oftentimes you'll try to fit a square peg into a round hole. So by going back and reviewing the policy, we can really understand a little bit more about the intent and really try to make sure that what is programmed matches that intent rather than blindly trying to find the best fit. We'll also do discovery meetings. So, part of that is really having discussions with you to understand your pain points, your overall merchant goals, where you want the program to be, 2, 3, 5 years from now, not just, a matter of plugging in, arbitrary fixes. Also, we'll want to do surveys, ask the travelers and your admins. Your admins are your front line. They are the ones that are, in the trenches day in and day out. So they're a great voice to listen to. What are their pain points? What are their experiences? And what are their perceptions of the OBT? Next, we'll actually do the audit itself. We'll look under the hood. We'll look at the policy review, look at the programming in terms of the content, the approval processes, the functionality. And then we'll start, really kind of digging in there and looking at the audit and the configuration and everything. And then we'll map it. We'll do our configuration audit. We'll look at the feeds and the API. We'll look at your permissions and settings, also your messaging and your content that you have up there, your pop-ups. Does it look like, the internet circa 1995 where pop-ups everywhere, things might be irrelevant, or is it really, tight messaging that you have to your travelers? And then, at the end of the day, what we'll deliver is recommended fixes, where we would prioritize things, what we would recommend, where we think that you're going to get the most bang out of your buck and really turn your site around. We'll also provide a complete blueprint of your site, what your site looks like today. And then that way you have everything, really gift wrapped and documented for you. And, again, that output is really going to be, not just documented baseline, but an improvement roadmap and a change control mechanism to help you drive this going forward. And then also, there's some additional considerations, while you're looking under the hood. So, annual health checks. So, what we recommend is doing an audit, every, 3 or so years on average. It could be longer, it could be shorter, but, the average is about 3 years. But we do recommend annual health checks. Make sure that you're doing a scheduled review of everything to make sure that nothing has changed out of sight, out of mind. Making sure that you have complete visibility to everything. Release impacts. Releases are something that happens all the time that, your TMC may or may not be sharing, or your OBT may or may not be sharing. Making sure that you're understanding those releases to make sure that you're, again, having the latest and most relevant content and information presented. Data and MIS audit, while you're doing an OBT audit, doing a holistic, review of your data and your MIS, your reportable fields, what you're actually capturing and reporting at the end of the day. That's always a good thing to look at too, making sure that it's still relevant to your company, to leadership and what they want to see at the end of the day. And then also, traveler engagement. What we recommend also considering is, perhaps doing a brand refresh at the same time, making sure that you have one tone of voice, whether it's not, that your OBT matches your overall messaging to your entire program. Also in your traveler engagement, it's not just about your branding, it's also about in your communications, it's also about your training and your job aids. What I always like to say is, there's that old adage, you can give somebody a fish and they can eat for a day, or you can teach them how to fish and they'll eat for life. So really making sure that you're giving them and empowering them with the right information so they can make those smart decisions. Not just how to book, but also what you want them to book at the end of the day. And then there's also the control. So making sure that you have your profile feed is right and tight, as well as your control apps. And then, the audit is really a reset, and the governance is really what keeps the door from drifting out of alignment. What's next? So you may be asking yourself, okay, we're considering an audit. So what do we do next to make sure that we're preparing for that and getting everything, our ducks in a row and quacking to move forward with an audit? So first, what we recommend is define your goals and your success criteria. What do you want to accomplish at the end of the day? What do you want your program to look like when it grows up? What do you want to ultimately accomplish by doing an OBT audit? Next, start collecting your documentation and your current pain points. So that is, anything from stuff from implementation, stuff from the last audit that you've done, any surveys you may have done, any feedback you may have done. The more data points and the more documentation points you have, the better we'll be informed to help make sure that we're moving things in the right direction. Next, looking at audit compliance functionality, content, data, and governance. So really kind of, looking at holistically, how you want it to look at the end of the day. What really should be, the right functionality? What should really be the right content? What do you want to capture in your OBT? Next, you want to prioritize the changes. You may have a lot of things, a lot on your wish list, but really, kind of what's the most important things? What are the high impact versus the low impact, high priority, low priority items? Next, really, meet with GoldSpring. Let us, talk about what we want to do and put a plan in place, and then implement and validate those actual fixes. And then at the end of the day, 6 months after we've conducted an audit, what we would always recommend is following up with your stakeholders, with your admins and other key personnel, to make sure that we're getting their feedback to see, okay, has this changed the needle? Has it moved everything in the right direction? So that's really, what we'll want to do next year, coming out of this presentation, looking at an audit going forward. One of the things that we'll want to leave you with, Will, always has this, this great thing that he shares at the end of a lot of presentations, where he talks about balance and harmony and prioritization. So, there was a professor that, was in front of his class, and he had a jar and he filled it with rocks, and he asked his class, is the jar full? And the class all nodded and said, yes, the jar is full. And then he took, pebbles, and he filled the rest of the jar with pebbles. And he said, okay, well, there was some additional space there. We filled it with the smaller pebbles. Is it now full? And they all said, yeah, it's full. It's full. So then he took sand, and he filled in the rest of the gap with sand. And he's, as you can see, he's adding more and more, more granular as he goes. And everybody concluded, yes, now it's full. And he said, okay, well, let's do that in reverse. So took the jar, dumped it out, filled it with sand, and everybody's like, yeah, it's full. Went to the pebbles. couldn't fit any pebbles in. There was no room because he put all the small stuff in first. The lesson here is really about making sure that, as you look at not just your OBT, but your program as a whole, make sure that you understand where your rocks, your pebbles, and your sand are in terms of everything, your big stuff, your medium stuff, and your little stuff in terms of your prioritization. And you want to make sure that you're prioritizing things, accordingly. Make sure that you are looking at the big stuff first and that you're doing that, and you'll always be going down the right path. And so that's really, what we want to leave you with today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate everybody's time today and going through this. I know we've got, we'll answer some questions now. I know that we've got one up from Tim Wrigley. How do you account for user error? When we consider poor search results, it may stem from travelers asking for flights or routings that do not exist, as an example. We may find that, many times frustration is tied to the user error and not the fault of the OBT itself. Tim, that is an excellent point. And so that's something that should definitely be considered here. I think that goes back to the training aspect, making sure that you're communicating, that you're training travelers, correctly, and that you're communicating with travelers correctly, making sure that they understand, the best way to book, the most efficient way to book, how to find the right search results that they're looking for. Also teaching them, what not to look for, teaching them to stay away from those flights that you don't want them to book, or that content that's really, kind of out of policy or out of optimization for your travel program. So that's really, comes not just down to training, it also comes down to your communication plan, your traveler engagement. So that can be flyers that you documents that you pass out or make available through your intranet page. It could be, pop-up messaging that you have, strategic messaging that's, active on your online booking tool as they go through the booking process. Or it could just even be, webinars, quarterly, traveler engagement that you do. But that's really, reaching out and engaging with your travelers. That is the best way to attack. Any other questions? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd just add a couple things to that, because the user behavior piece is absolutely a part of any comprehensive audit. And knowing those specific complaints and specific scenarios that people have trouble with can really help guide some of the testing, because when you test those scenarios, you can really determine what the root cause is, but also determine how the tool's responding to that scenario, and like Harry was saying, if maybe some messaging needs to be changed or added, because it should be, even if the results come back with nothing, there should be something that's still guiding the traveler in that process and in that search. They shouldn't have the impression that the tool's broken because their search results didn't come back the way they expected them to. So I think that, you don't want to assume that every poor result is a technology failure. Some of it is user error, but you want to kind of go through that experience to see what it's like from their side so that you can make adjustments to help guide them and kind of eliminate some of that frustration.
Yeah. What I'll also add is, surveys and traveler feedback, that is one of your best ways to identify if that is really one of the culprits. So making sure that you are doing those surveys, making sure that you're engaging with your admins and your heavy traveler customers, as well as your light traveler customers. The ones that don't use it frequently are the ones that oftentimes have, challenges that you need to address there. The other thing that the OBT will do, so, not just using your surveys to kind of target, your areas of attack, whether it's things that you need to fix or things that you need to train on. But, one of the other things that an OBT audit will do is also look at comprehensively, what are the best way to attack some of those things. There are different features that OBTs have that may or may not be turned on. So making sure that you're optimizing those. Sometimes those features might be third-party features that will optimize your travel program and better fit, again, your overarching goals. So, as we know that, some OBTs have integration with, meetings platforms. So if meetings is a huge gap, you can always, kind of tie those third-party plugins in. or there's even, third-party plugins for, the Do Traveler engagement. I know that, Concur, as an example, has a couple of different third parties that will help, drive their travelers to better, compliance options or better sustainability options. So, those could be an option. There's another feature that OBTs have that, is often overlooked, a feature like WalkMe. WalkMe is a great option that you can plug into an OBT, on some OBTs at least, that will help travelers walk through through the process. So it will kind of be their Sherpa and guide them through the online booking process. So if you are seeing a lot of, issues with, travelers that may be inexperienced, or, maybe, the noise is coming from a lot of people that don't book often, or if you have a lot of, if everybody travels maybe once or twice a year at most, maybe WalkMe is an option that you need, or similar is an option that you need to consider turning on to really help optimize your site to kind of cut down on the noise and improve that traveler experience. So those are, again, just some recommendations that we may come out of, an audit with. Can you provide an OBT audit checklist in a granular form? So we can't really show how, the recipe, so to speak. But, what I will share is, holistically, what we look at is, everything, at a granular level. We will look at your policy. So really, is your policy optimized? How is it built? How are each of the countries built? How are each of the different configurations built? Is it consistent? Is it unique to every market? Should it be consistent or unique to every market? Oftentimes, consistent, experience is best, but sometimes, it's not one size fits all. We'll look at the configuration. Again, is the content going right? Is the way that, the search results, being presented consistent across the base? Is it what you want them to see? So we'll look at configuration. We'll also look at the messaging. We'll look at the feed, making sure that your feed is going through correctly, and that you're capturing, you're not getting junk in your feed, so to speak. We'll look at, again, your overall intent of your program, your suppliers. Oftentimes you'll have suppliers that are flagged preferred that have not been preferred for 5 years plus. So making sure that everything is current, that's a big thing. So we really, kind of, look under the hood holistically in a lot of those areas. Julie, anything that you would add to that as far as things that we look at in terms of an OBT audit, in terms of areas?
Yeah, it's hard to simplify it into a checklist that would apply to everyone, because an audit is very customized to the particular organization and what they're looking to get out of their booking tool and the issues that they're having. So obviously the areas that we look at are consistent, but the fixes are not. So it would be hard to simplify it into one checklist that would apply to everyone, that you could just go down the list and it would cover everything. It's just a little more, I guess, complicated than that, because once you get into it, you're really looking for those root causes and solutions that are specific to that setup and that configuration.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Julie. It's a very bespoke process, and that's one of the reasons why we like a discovery call, because it's not just about filling out a questionnaire. We really want to hear from you and have a dynamic conversation with you about what is going on with the program. Where are you going with it? Not just, oh, well, we're hearing it's clunky, or we're hearing that, we can't find this or that. Understanding the big picture of, and really kind of diving down into various areas really help us make sure that what we're coming up with is a customized solution that best fits your needs.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I think, it was great to have all of you on and answer your questions. If you do have any questions, or if you want to engage with us about doing an OBT audit, or, have further discussions, kicking tires on it, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know. We're happy to talk about it. It's something that we're passionate about. It's something that, we really find helps a lot of our customers and making sure that they're going down the road. So thank you again.
Yep. Thank you all.